The person we've got on here, I had a beautiful opportunity to share some time with him in Colorado. We got to have him on the show here before. And when I was thinking about leadership, some of the conversations that he and I had about leading by example, doing what you say you're going to do. And if you make mistakes, being honest about it, moving forward. And sometimes we have an assumption of what leadership's going to look like for us, because here's how we're going to plug into the world. This is how we're going to be leaders. And then something changes.
Yeah.
And so this guy gets that. This guy gets that tenfold, because his vision of how he was going to lead shifted in a way that maybe is not the way he wanted. But I'm so glad it's the way it is, because that's how we got to meet him. And he's beautiful as is. Our awesome friend, Guy Berlando.
Hi.
Welcome to the Unfiltered Experience.
What's up, brother?
It's great to see you.
Intro. Yeah, great to see you guys again, too.
Awesome. So I got to tease Guy real quick, because we had a really fun time doing a hike when we were both a little bit injured. He's a really awesome leader, except he's not that good at hiking and directions. Now I'm messing with him. We got lost, and I think he and I thought it was fun. The other guys with us were like, "Can we stop being lost?" I was like, "This is cool. This is more hike time." He's like, "Take a left, take a right," and I'm like, "I'll follow him. I trust him." And we ended up in the middle of nowhere, but that was a great hike. So I did it.
That was fun.
No, that's a firm confirmation of the blind leading the blind, I guess.
Yeah, something like
that. There's a GPS app that, I use trails.com, so I just stay on the trail. I just follow the little trail and make sure I don't get lost.
That was my plan.
Yeah. I think, all jokes aside, we were having such a good time. When you're having fun and you forget where the time went, you're having a drink with your buddy and oh my God, I told my wife I'd be home 4 hours ago. It was one of those things where we're walking, having fun, and our bodies probably were going, "Hey, you guys can stop anytime now." But we had to keep going because we weren't back to the car yet. But it was.
Yeah, I had a bad calf. I think it was your back, right?
I just flipped the snowmobile. We probably shouldn't have gone on a long hike, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a mile, and it turned out to be 6.5.
Well, it started, we weren't even going to hike because we were hurt. We're like, let's just go meditate somewhere. And then it turned into a gentle hike. Then we saw that beautiful reservoir. Then we're like, let's check this out. And suddenly we're like, a day later, we're still going.
Yeah,
so what you guys did as leaders, you adjusted your plans accordingly based on what it is that you were presented with in front of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we had compliant followers.
It's funny because when they tell the story versus me tell it, I'm always like, that was fun. And they're like, "Man, I was really exhausted. Why were we still walking?" I'm like, I don't know. It's just an adventure. So
it was an adventure. Yeah.
You got to push yourself outside your comfort zone. And I think that's one of the things that so many people have an expectation of, well, I expect this to be that. And then when you go outside that expectation, that's where the true growth really happens. I mean, both as a leader and as a follower. I've known that my leaders have taken me through situations, both personally and professionally, where I didn't want to necessarily go. I had an expectation I was going to stop here, but their expectation was no, I'm going to push you to grow you so that you get outside of that expectation and you start to see what the real reality can be for you when you go outside that perceived limitation, if you will. And I know we're going to talk about limiting beliefs on here. So yeah, I'm excited.
No, I think you nailed it. I really do. I mean, that's what a leader is going to do for you, right? It's help push you outside your comfort zone. But just think about it from a personal perspective. When you're leading yourself, you got to push yourself outside that comfort zone. So a leader being able to do that for other people is because they've already done it for themselves.
Amen.
And how do we do that? I mean, when you think back in your career, Guy, where do you think that there was a pivotal point where you learned that process and you learned that rule?
I'm still learning it.
I love that.
You use that word evolution. It is an evolution. It is an evolving and growing through that process of trial and error. And where I think a lot of people fail and don't understand about leadership is you don't try it one or two times and think, all of a sudden I'm going to be successful. No, leadership is trying and failing, getting better a little bit each of one of those steps of the way until you gain all that knowledge and wisdom. So when did that shift happen? I don't know. It's one of the biggest ones was leaving the military and then starting a business and learning that there's different types of leadership. The positional leadership of the military is very different from having to lead people, say at a church or something like that, where it's all volunteers. I mean, you got somebody that is an employee and you're paying them to do work. It's still a different type of leadership. And I think we all recognize good leaders and bad leaders in all those positions, regardless of what position the leader holds. If they understand people, if they understand the leadership qualities that makes for a good leader, then regardless if they're in a position of leadership, positional leadership, I've got a rank, I've got a CEO, vice president label behind me, or if I am the leader of a church or network marketing group or whatever it is, then you're going to be way ahead of the game. And that's the secret, right? So what is that quality that makes a great leader?
That's what I want to talk about, because, Chris and I are always talking about, identity. I'm always sharing, you have a tight mission, you have a vision, and you've got your identity. And what throws you out of balance is when your identity shifts or your vision shifts. And so identity could shift where you lose a job, where you don't attain something you expected to, or there's a breakup or somebody passes away and your identity shifts. What's behind that? So to your point, like, let's say that I'm a general in a military, the branch, I'm a general, I'm pretty high up there, right? So that's somebody who, your identity is clearly with that. So people just saying you're a leader, but what is it inside when you coach your, son's little league team, or, nobody knows what your title is? What am I seeing? Like, what's really underneath all that? Because I see a lot of people, they think, okay, this person's leader, only title oriented, but what qualifies you to be that? Did you move up the ranks? Was it time spent? Was it a degree you got? But what's really behind that? So let's talk about that a little bit, because I see you as a leader. I see Chris as a leader. I see myself as a leader. But what are some of the things that are sprinkled in there so that others might see the same?
I think you read a lot of books on leadership. I mean, I know I have as well. I just finished another great one from Maxwell. Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. He's got some really great concepts in there. The one thing that I look for, my number one, and something that I hold myself very accountable to, is my character. Yeah. I think character above everything else is it's got to be a pillar, if you will. It's got to be a basic foundation of that person, because if that person's character is not intact, if they've got a faulty character, and we don't have to go through the definition of character, we can look it up on our own, but there are different definitions of character too. But to me, what it means is somebody that is honest to themselves and honest to the people around them. They're going to follow through with what they say they're going to do. They don't just utter words and then turn around and go do something else, right? Mm-hmm. They ask of people something that they've already done themselves. They don't ask for somebody to do something that they haven't done if it is within their, expertise, if you will. So it's just, I think character is paramount.
I love that. I love that. When I think about character, one of the first words that popped in my mind was authenticity, because yes. I know as I was coming up in the ranks, I was told to be, you have to be this person, you have to portray this person. And I'm like, no, I'd rather be authentic to myself so that I can build that connection with my team so they know, like, and trust me. And that's something that I battled with some of my leaders early on, was the fact, like, just let me be me. Like, I know through my character and through my standards and my values that I won't ask somebody to do something that I won't do myself. That built that connection with people, to want them to do things on themselves, because I know there's different modes of different leadership. And I found that co-creative leadership aspect of co-creating the goals, co-creating the opportunities for everybody, that really solidified my establishment as being a great leader. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about some of those books that you've read and some of the things they talk about, the emotional intelligence standpoint of being a great leader.
Yeah. Do you hear a lot now about that emotional quotient, right? Mm-hmm. And it is really, really important, because that's another thing you're going to look for in that character. Is this person fly off the handle at the least little thing that goes wrong, or are they very stable in their persona and their character? And emotions have a lot to do with this, especially if you've got a high pressure type of leadership position, or you mentioned the little league coach, right? And then, if you allow your emotions to get involved into that, bad things can happen, and it's not good for the kids that are looking at you as the leader, right? So being able to have a stable emotional quotient in their part of that character, I think, is incredibly important. There's so many great books. One of my favorite books is 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's also by Maxwell. He covers a lot of different things in that book that, surmises a lot of different aspects of leadership, a lot of the pitfalls of leadership, if you will, as well. And another one that I really love is Launching a Leadership Revolution, and that's by Orrin Woodward and Chris Brady. And they're a couple network marketers, which is the industry that I'm in full time now. And they bring not only all the kind of stuff that Maxwell's talking about, but what I really love about it is they understand what it's like to lead an all volunteer army. And it is totally different type of leadership than having a job or a positional leadership, if you will. We talk about character, you talk about the emotional quadrant, people put on archetypes. Well, I'm the vice president of this company now. I just got this promotion, so now I'm this, and they step into a different archetype, or they walk into that office and they step into a different archetype. Not necessarily a bad thing if it's kept in check and it's done with awareness. But if you step into an archetype and you believe it, and that is who you are, and you start pushing that down onto other people, people are not dumb. People are going to see through that in a heartbeat, and you're going to lose trust. And that's terrible for a leader, losing that trust, because it takes forever to get it back.
I like that. I always call those vehicles, Guy. One of the things is like one of the vehicles I move through this life with, with is a father. One's a friend, one's a podcast host, one is a professor. And so some people have difficulty taking that VP hat off when they go home, or when they're talking to somebody about something outside of work and saying, hey, is everything going on okay at home? I'm going to take off the VP hat, and for a moment, I just want to connect with you as a human and go, this is off record. I just want to make sure everything's working out. Like, am I doing what I need to do here, supporting you outside of here? Questions like that. And you're right. Some people bring that home, like I'm still Mr. VP or whatever. And if you lose that, your identity's gone and all your leadership goes with it. So again, I love the idea of character. I love the idea of becoming our best selves and messing up constantly. One of the things we were talking about in my business class the other day, and I think it'll be pertinent to talk about right here, is realizing that idea of character or authenticity or genuineness comes with mistake after mistake after mistake, and exposure to your incongruency with self. So the day that you find out, like, hey, these animals are treated poorly, but I'm still eating the meat, now it's on me. You know what I mean? So now I've got to make a decision. Do I not eat meat anymore? Do I eat pasture raised? So we're constantly getting new information and adapting. Talk about that as a leader, because I think a lot of people think leaders are very static, and it's completely the opposite. They're like, oh, that guy's solid, he's strong. I feel like it's exactly the opposite. It's constantly dynamic and moving, and every single day I'm a different person. Talk about that a little bit as a leader.
Well, you guys both kind of touched on that, and it's about becoming better ourselves, right? I mean, because we got a leader of one, a leader of many. If I can't lead myself, I can't lead any, right? So if I can't lead one, I can't lead any, meaning myself. So it's totally flexible, and it's totally constantly changing. And I think you said something else in there too, about making mistakes. And one of the things I think that is people that, going back to this archetype thing, people that believe that they cannot show weakness, they cannot show that they made a mistake or something like that, they're in an archetype that is not beneficial to them or the people that they're leading. The more humble you can be as a leader, you maintain the qualities in your character, but you're also being upfront and honest with the people in a very respectful way. Let's say I as a leader, I made a bonehead decision. I mean, I thought it was the best decision at the time with all the information I had available to me, but it turned out to be not such a good decision. I owe it to my people to go, hey, you know what? I'm not going to shift the blame on anybody else. I'm not going to shift the blame onto the people that gave me, that I used the information to make that final decision, but because I still made the decision. But I'm going to own up that I made the decision. So now we're going to go back and go, okay, why did I come to this decision? What could we have done better in this process? We're going to have an open, honest discussion with the folks. And I think that's one of the things that all of us have witnessed in our periods of time. I know my 20-year military career, flying for Southwest Airlines, you see it all the time. And now as a network marketer, is people that can own up and have that open communication. It's very easy to recognize a poor leader or a bad leader, right? You're going to go, oh man, I didn't like this about this guy. I don't like this about that guy. And then you ask, well, what is it about this leader that you really like? It's usually going to come down to character, trust, and his ability to have the relationship with people, understanding people at a relationship business, he or her. So I think that just being honest. And because when you're doing that, now you're also getting more input from the others, you're learning more, and you're building even greater rapport with the people that you're working with, and they can understand it. I have a really hard time. I've gone through this multiple times. I'm actually going through one right now where a person of leadership position feels that he is in the right with everything that he is doing, and he's unopen to listening to other sides of the story. And I think that is a very poor quality of a leader. Really
what you're talking about, Guy, reminds me of this specific incident that I had happen in my workplace years ago. I was director of operations for over 20 years, led multiple teams across different continents. And there was this one situation where my HR representative notified me. She goes, "We're going to be conducting an investigation about you. And we have to tell you, don't ask any questions about what's going on. Somebody's made a complaint about you." And I have a very open and honest relationship with my team. So I was really surprised to hear this. So first thing I did was I notified my boss who was out of town and said, "Hey, by the way, this thing is going on. I'll stand back and I'll trust that this whole process is going to work itself out, but everything's going to be fine. There's going to be, the truth is going to come out." And what happened is they actually started conducting the investigation in more of a wagon gathering kind of situation. Like, has Chris ever made you feel like you weren't smart enough? Has Chris ever promised you something that so it became this wagon gathering thing. And unbeknownst to my team, they were answering honestly, "Well, yeah, Chris did this and Chris did this." And so it became this whole entire thing. And then as it became more of an entire thing, they're like, "Chris, we want you to, keep a distance from your staff." And I was like, "What's going on?" And I sat there and I thought, what can I do to handle this situation of stress and overwhelm to be able to set the example for them that once this is all over and once the dust clears, that they'll have even more respect for me, even though I don't believe that I did anything wrong. And so the ultimate fallout was it was a few people that were disgruntled about expectations that they had set for themselves that were recently realigned in their annual review. And so what happened was it was a bunch of misunderstandings. And so what I told the team, they said, "Okay, Chris, the investigation's done. You're fine. We realized that, there was just some distorted opinions about you." And I said, "You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to get everybody in a room, including yourselves, including my boss. And I want to talk about this. And I want to accept responsibility for my part on this, perhaps for maybe misunderstanding my team, but also to set that example for saying, hey, listen, when something's happening in your life, this is how you step up and this is how you rise to it." And so I actually apologized to my entire team. I said, I apologize for you guys having to go through this process. And I think what I've learned out of this process is that I can become a more effective listener, and perhaps we can talk about your expectations a little bit more deeply and make sure that there's not any of those ambiguities, that when you get your annual review, it's not a surprise for you. And so I said, I tell you what, my goal from this opportunity is to even earn your trust and respect even more deeply. And they were like, "No, Chris, you're fine. You're cool." And they said this all in front of the HR person. And so it caused me to sit there and think about, in those situations of stress and overwhelm, what it is that we can do for ourselves to be able to set that better example. What are your ideas on that? Because there's so many leaders out there, they're doing more with less. They're leading different generations in the workplace. We know we've heard about Generation Z, being the quiet and the quitting generation. We got Gen Ys, we got millennials, we got, Generation X, we still got baby boomers in there. How do we help people handle that chaos and that stress and overwhelm in their life, whether it's in a personal situation or in a professional situation? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. What a great story too. First of all, people are people. I don't care what label we want to put on them. People are all they're individuals, and each person has a soul. Each person has their own individual spirit, and that's what we want to connect with as much as anything else. Your story just had me think of care enough to confront. Yeah. Because another thing that a leader will do, a good leader will confront, right? They are not afraid to turn, or they won't turn and hide. They're going to go, "Okay, great. Here's the information. Let's hash it out, right? Let's get this all out on the table so that we can get beyond the BS. And we know where all of us sit. We all know exactly where each person is. And if you got any kind of rumor stuff going on in the background, or this going on over here, and you're not confronting that, you're just waiting for a big explosion to happen, right? Yeah. So I think that's really important too. And the leader, one of the other things, and it's part of character, is that they don't turn around and run cowardly, right? They got the courage, and they've learned this. And maybe some people have a natural innate ability about this, but I do believe it's something that everyone can learn as well. And that is, when a challenge arises, confront it. Yeah. Don't push it away. Confront it now. So when you start talking about these different generations and the different challenges that they're having, and they absolutely are, and it's a social issue I think we've got going on, especially in this country right now. It's a disaster. And that, I mean, that could be a whole nother series, right?
Exactly.
Talking about all the things that are kind of mixed up. But if you keep in mind that they're people, and try to connect with them authentically. You said something else, Christopher, in there that was really important about asking questions and asking good questions, and then listening to the response. Don't ask it just to be asking the question. Be literally there to learn from the other person so you can understand better how to relate with what's going on in their life, be able to address their situation. Maybe they're not a right fit for the organization. Maybe they need to be let go. Even as you like them as a person and everything else, but they're not performing. I mean, it comes down to performance, right? So if you're not performing in this job, if you will, then it might be time for you to move on. But before we get to that point, if we confront it early on, then maybe we can help you grow so that we don't have to let you go, but you actually grow so you can stay and become better. And then you've gained some wisdom and knowledge that you can pass on to an underling as well.
See, I love that a lot, because I think this happens in relationships, one-on-one relations, small groups, families, organizations. We have a tendency we sit here and we want to, allow ourselves to build up resentment behind the mask. So we're like, well, Chris is always doing this, and that's why I couldn't hit my numbers. My wife is always saying this, and that's why I'm this. And we walk away from the accountability. And so I'm hearing that loud and clear. I think a really solid leader will confront, connect, and say, what is it that you really want? Why are we starting to look outward for why things aren't working instead of looking inward? What can you do to control the situation? And I think a lot of us, especially some of the younger folks, have hit an exhaustion point where everything is so overwhelming. It's much easier to freeze. And so we used to see fight or flight. We're seeing a lot more of the freeze. And the freeze is coming from the total overwhelm. And so I want you to talk more about exactly that, because when you're confronting, how can we do that in a way that works with everybody? Because with my students, I'll be like, hey, what is it? I see that you're struggling. You didn't show up for class. I know you want to be here. Why did you come? And sometimes they say stuff like, I don't even know. I was just felt so overwhelmed. I thought it was too late. I'm like, do you still think it's too late? So talk about that. What can we do to kind of bring people back to center as leaders by both example, questioning, and that idea of confrontation in a non-aggressive way?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going through my mind right now, Scott, with that, because that's key, right? I mean, being able to, it's about building that rapport enough to have that connection, because you can ask the question, but if you don't have the rapport with the person, they may not open up to you. And as a leader, if one taking the lead in this conversation, you have to recognize that, and you have to keep working at it until you get that rapport. How do you know you got the rapport? You're going to see it in the body language first. All right. You're going to see a relaxation within the body. You're going to see the eyes soften. You're going to probably see the corners of the mouth soften. I mean, these are probably way beyond what the average person is looking for, but subconsciously you're taking it in anyhow. And if you're looking for those kinds of awareness cues, now you started to bridge that gap. Before hitting a hard conversation, I like to call them crucial conversations. Before you hit a crucial conversation head on, you got to build that rapport first. You got to get that person to the point where they're going to be wanting and willing. So how do you do that? Well, you could talk about the weather, right? I mean, you could talk about what's going well in their life, right? Let's start on the positives. Let's get them talking about themselves. In this industry that I'm in, we talk a lot about the why, right? Because nobody has to be here. They're doing it for their own reasons. Their own why is what we call it, right? What is driving them to want to show up and get very little money in the beginning for the promise that big money is going to come at the end. So when you got somebody that's, maybe a little not performing well, or is down in the mouth, if you will, or something like that, and you pull them aside to have a conversation with them, you want to get them talking about themselves first. That is the best way to start building that rapport. You guys are doing a great job, because I'm getting to do a lot of talking here. Right? So I love you guys, but it's true. When you get a person to be able to start talking from their heart, something that they're very passionate about. Maybe they love animals. Just pulling something out of, hey man, I saw this really cool thing on this Facebook reel. Can I show it to you? And you show them a picture of a dog, and they're really into dogs. And you're just showing a little bit of different kind of concern from instead of just coming from this authoritarian leadership position and then you soften them up a little bit. And well, how did you get interested in dogs? How did you like dogs? You know, what is it about dogs that you relate to? And then you can start working that through questions, Scott, into the job or into the situation that we're really trying to narrow down. Is this the long, I mean, is this the shortcut? Obviously not. I did a lot of work with horses. And horses, and I don't stick with me because it will make sense. Horses think different. Horses are always looking for a leader. I probably learned more from working with horses about leadership than I did from reading any book that I've ever read. Because a horse, it's got a mind of its own. And if you're not the leader it's looking for, bye-bye. It's not going to pay any attention to you. It'll kick you off its back. It'll run away from you or anything else. But if you're able to bridge that spiritual connection with that horse, what happens is they talk about it joining up. The horse will actually come in and the horse will actually approach you and touch you. And when that touch happens, you just got instant rapport. And now that horse will follow you anywhere. So that kind of relates to what I'm talking about. We as humans have a very direct line way of thinking. I see the ice cream shop over here. I'm going straight to the ice cream shop and I'm going to go get myself a chocolate ice cream cone. All right. But a horse or people that are stuck can't see the path to the ice cream shop. So we got to take a little bit of a roundabout approach to take away the wall, the clouds that are clouding their vision that has them so stuck. And as we can start clearing that out, now they can see the ice cream shop and go get their simple ice cream cone. Crazy. I have no idea where that came from.
I just want you to know that I was laughing my head off because I teach love over fear. Okay. I'm constantly teaching people to use fear as a springboard to move into a world of love and all your dreams sit there. Well, I had a really fun experience with a horse. We were up in Utah and we're on this ranch and this guy goes, well, you're really big. So I'm going to give you this quarter horse. He goes, just be a leader and be like strong. And I'm like, hell does that mean? This thing, so what does a quarter horse mean? He's explaining to me how fast this horse is. So instead of just saying you're a leader, just love it, like what you just said, like connect with it. He's like, just get on it and like show dominance, whatever. So I'm on it, scared shitless, completely. Like, I mean, I'm sure this thing's not listening to my language going, I'm going to mess with this guy because he started running guy and I have never been so nervous. And they were trying to get him to slow down. When I got off of him, I never wanted to get on a horse again. I did again, but dude, I was like, I am not a leader. I'm not a horse guy. So when you were saying that, I'm picturing the horse going, this ain't my leader. This ain't my guy.
And it's sensing the fear.
Oh, it was.
Right. So it senses the fear and then you're feeding the fear into the horse. But that's true with anything when we're working with people too, right? They either feel the confidence or they see the fear or feel the fear, even if it's not words being said. And so as a leader, the more confident you are, how do you build the confidence? Well, that's a whole nother subject, right? But a good leader is going to be very confident in where they're at. And that begins with the self, really.
Okay. So I love this. I could tell a horse story, but I'll tell you guys after camera. But one of the things we've been talking about is communication. In this world of chaos and overwhelm, how can we become more effective listeners? Because I'm finding that so many people have this selective hearing disorder. They're not paying attention. Somebody says 200 words. They hear 30 of them. They're embarrassed because they weren't paying attention. They put the 30 words together. They make an assumption and they go off and they do that thing. And of course, we know what happens when we make assumptions. In your professional experience, in your personal experience, what can we do right now to give people tips on how to become more effective listeners? Because I believe by doing so, we could change the trajectory of a lot of relationships right now. What is it for you that makes a great listener?
It's interesting. I got I was in a meeting or something, we were in the military, a big, large group. And the commander, whoever it was up there giving the lecture or the speech, and somebody got distracted. And I mean, everybody else is paying attention, but the one person got distracted and he just stops. And he goes, okay, obviously what one person's doing in the room is more important than what I have to say. Anyhow, that just really resonated with me. And I do it with my wife all the time. I'll be like, hey, I got something really important to tell you. She goes, okay, yeah. And I'll be talking and then a text message comes in or something and it goes, what's that? And I'll stop and I'll just stop sharing. But that's what I do as a leader now. If somebody's not paying attention or I notice they're being distracted, then I will just pause and I'll wait to see how they respond. It's amazing. Try this sometimes. People will wait 30 seconds before they even realize you stopped talking. So you're right, Christopher, that the selective hearing is very, very real. So what can we do to be better listeners is, first of all, be aware of it, right?
Yeah.
Aware of it when somebody's talking to you and the text message comes by, and you don't even notice the text message, right? So it starts with being aware of. It's so easy to be distracted. How do you become aware? It's just asking yourself those questions. Am I a good listener? What is a good listener? You got to ask yourself those questions, and then go back and replay maybe some crucial conversations, some other conversations where maybe there was misunderstanding, and take ownership of it. Did I really listen to what was going on? Did I really understand that? And if it wasn't, or if you do feel that maybe I didn't get it all, again, care enough to confront, hey, you know what, Christopher, I got to apologize. I had a lot on my mind. Not sure if I really understood everything that you were saying. Can we start this conversation over again? Can we have this conversation again? Something along those lines. But how to train yourself to be a better listener is to train yourself to be able to focus on one thing at one time. Zen, I would never forget. I mean, I didn't study Zen or anything, but I read a book on Zen philosophy when I was a young kid in college. And it was all about focusing on what you're doing. If you're having your meal, you focus on your meal and not focusing on your meal and doing this kind of thing, right? If you're in a conversation, you're in a conversation. There's nothing else around. So a lot of it's got to be training, because we got the habit now of being so distracted. Yeah. And this world we live in right now is all about distracting you. That's its job. That's his job.
You brought up an interesting, like the flip side of something that I do to try to help people with this, because again, somebody who's ADHD themselves, I mean, I put a lot of focus on being present, with people, and sometimes I fail, like I remember Chris and I were doing a podcast out in LA, and literally a squirrel went by, like the ultimate of irony, like squirrel, like right in the middle of the podcast. Like it's almost like metaphorically flawless. But you know what I do with my students a lot is I stop and I understand that there's a lot of different people, try to meet people where they're at. So I'll ask different questions. Does that resonate? Mm-hmm. And I'll sit and so I'm like, in what way? And so if somebody like nods, I'll go, in what way? And they're like, well, and so then they get chunks to learn to process, to come back to center. Because I think one of the things that's easy for us to do too is we're going like this, and then we're like, and then we just kind of lose. But if you come back and you're like, well, how does that resonate to you? Does that make sense? What doesn't make sense? And so I'll ask those questions to kind of bring them back to center. So I almost feel like I'm helping to train them to listen in little like bites so they can do downloads. And I know for me, if I sit there for a long time, I start telling myself stories or doing this, like I'm listening to you. But then all of a sudden, when you said the horse thing, if I was watching this podcast, I would go, I remember the time I was in Utah, and so you've got to figure out, come back to center. Why am I watching this podcast? What's the value of it? Why am I here? And so I get it. So let's talk about maybe some ways that we can even self-train, because for me, I know it's taking it in little bits and then coming back to center. So I'll even ask myself, does that make sense? Does that resonate, Scott? Why are you listening? So talk about that. Is there any other like tips or something that we can like download chunks, or I don't know?
Yeah, I think it's got to become a practice. That's the only thing that's popping in my mind right now in that regards is it's got to become a practice, and be aware when you're doing various things. Do you put your full attention in it, or, multitasker? Fighter pilots were known to be multitaskers. We had to be for our job, right? I mean, that was one of the things. But multitasking, it's been proven you cannot multitask and be as efficient if you're just focusing on one thing. So it's a matter of being able to focus fully in one area and realize what's causing a distraction from that focus. I'm sure there's probably, maybe games or puzzles or something like that. It's something that you really got to focus in on. But I would say with the people that you care most about, and just when you're having a conversation with them, focus on that conversation. Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, don't allow yourself to be distracted. And if you do get distracted, instead of just going, "Whoa, I just got distracted," own up to it. because the more you own up to it, the more it's registering in different parts of the brain going, ooh, that didn't feel good. Because I just had to say, hey, I apologize. I just got distracted. Can you say that again?
Yep.
If you do that in a conversation, the person probably already knows you were distracted. So you're going to gain a little bit of credibility in there, but you're also training your mind what not to do. You know, when speaking, they Toastmasters, for instance, we had a little animal clicker. You know, you ever seen those things?
Yep.
So every time you said an ah or an they would click you, and that trained the brain to reduce the amount of ahs and ums. So it's the same thing. Anything you can do, and I think, having not thought about this ahead of time, Scott, my number one thing would be every time you're engaged in a conversation, you're paying attention to that person. If you ever go to a big event and you got a very famous speaker out there, you know, say a Tony Robbins, I don't know, anybody, and you watch them afterwards talking with the people in the crowd, they never waver their focus away from that person. They are dialed in on that person, listening to what they have to say. So we can do that with our kids. We can do that with our parents. We can do that as parents with our fellow parent or any other kind of leader in a job, if you will, or at the church, wherever it may be. And those little conversations, you start practicing that for 5 minutes, I'm not going to be distracted. It's amazing. You could probably change a lot.
So well said, Guy Berlando, dude. We could sit here and talk to you for hours. Amazing content dropped in here, and there's just so many nuggets. So if you guys joined the podcast, either the video podcast or the audio podcast halfway through, be sure to go back and check out the full length feature of this podcast, because what it will do is we'll enrich your life and enrich your relationships and make you a better person overall. Guy, where can people get a hold of you and kind of continue the conversation, get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, anybody who wants to reach out to me, my email is simply guyberlando@gmail.com. I have a website. It's guyberlando.com. And then I'm on Facebook as well as Guy Berlando. So those are different ways. And I've also written a book. It's this one right here. You kind of see it in the background as well. Nice. But I think that it covers a lot in communication, understanding ourselves and how to relate better with other people, which is really important, I think, in this leadership discussion. And the better you understand communication, the better you understand how to relate to people, for yourself first, but then to other people, I think overall, the better leader you're going to become. And it is, somebody said it in the very beginning, I'm not sure if it was you, Scott, or Christopher. It's about I think it was you, Scott, that about becoming better. And that is one of the traits that a leader will promote of themselves, is that they're always trying to get better. They never arrive.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as there. There is no there. Right. And don't forget the book's name for those listening on the audio podcast. It's Discovering Your Authentic Truth. And you said the word authentic time and time again, genuine, authentic, super beautiful word. And I think that's something we need to become a little bit more of, all of us.
Yeah, so true. All right, Mr. Guy Berlando, we're going to put you backstage here for a second. Scott and I are going to end out the show. Don't go anywhere, because we still want to have a little chat with you. But thank you again for being here again for the second time, a repeat guest. Thank you for being here, brother, and sharing your brilliance. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you.
I love you guys. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much, and to everybody out there, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you.
Dude, that's that conversation was fire, pure fire. I mean, dollar for dollar, pound for pound, all the different tips and shit and stuff that we shared in there. I mean, what was your takeaway, kind of overall thinking about this conversation tonight, Scott?
I just like the simplicity of these conversations, and I think Guy has just been right on point with that too. You know, we always think with leadership, we're thinking titles, we're thinking all the things, and backing up into the middle. You know, the word authentic that he even has in his book, I think, is on point. The more authentic that we get, the more willing to say, hey, I made a mistake, and grow from it. That's huge. And I think more and more of us need to see that, because we have these illusions of what leaders are or what people that we look up to are. And they're nothing more than illusions, because we're only seeing what we get to see.